Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today for today's webinar, Top 10 Considerations for Banks, CPAs, and Benefit Brokers Entering the Payroll Business. If you joined us 2 weeks ago, we had a similar topic, was the top 10 considerations of why bank CPAs, benefit brokers should consider entering the payroll business. And if you found that to be a compelling case, now we're going to talk about the things that you need to think about before actually entering. So if you missed the webinar 2 weeks ago, hop on the website. We have the recorded version there for you to check out. Go to assuresoftware.com/webinars. You'll find that there, and this is really the part 2 to that piece. So without further ado, let me introduce today's panel. So my name is Mike Fenoy. I'm the head of marketing here at Assure, and joining me is Kathy Palmer, who is our head of reseller development, and Josh Goman, who's the director of information security. So as we think about entering into the payroll business, there's lots of planning that has to happen, right? So let's jump in, Kathy, with question number 1. You know, if I'm a bank, I've got my set of customers. I'm a CPA, I've got my set of customers. I've got my if I'm a benefit broker, I've got my current book. How should I be thinking about a target market? You know, who's a good fit, who's not a good fit for payroll? How should I be thinking, selling into my current base versus expanding out? Give us some guidance here.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And this is a great first question because, as you just said, I mean, the first key thing is if you are a bank or a broker or a CPA or any other company that is looking to getting into the payroll business that has a base of customers already, your first look is at your current customer base. What is the makeup of the current customer base? I mean, how many employees do they have? And this is where some of the differences will be too in your business. In the payroll business, it's not necessarily just like revenue driven. It is employee driven. So if you can get a feel for the size of the businesses, whether or not if you're a bank, it falls into your small business category or your mid-market category or your enterprise, but look at where you have the highest concentration of your clients and the makeup of those clients. Because it's, really the key is, I mean, do you want to be in the small business? Is this primarily a small business focus? Do you want to go up market? Do you want to try to generate the opportunity to sell to larger customers? It's not necessarily a geographic type of decision when you're going into this. It's really much more what type of customer are you looking for? The other thing that I would do, and I've seen some of the partners I've worked with in the past do, is in addition to sort of the segments within your own customer base, is the verticals. Do you have certain concentrations of verticals? I mean, do you primarily work with manufacturing companies, or do you work with restaurants or those in the hospitality? Again, that's a great way. You have the expertise in-house with that. You have a current customer base in that area. And so that would be a great way for you to look at, I think we should concentrate small businesses in the quick serve, just to give an example. So I think when it comes to the target market, just to summarize, look at your own base, do the analysis of your base, see where the opportunities are for you to expand that, because your first cross-sell is going to be with your existing customer base, and then how you can broaden that when you start to market your service externally.
Hey, Kathy, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but one of the things we talked about in part 1 of this series was thinking not just about geo, right? So you alluded to it, thinking about verticals, and I think it makes good common sense. You start with your own customer base and look where the concentration lies there. But maybe talk about some of the benefits of going to a vertical beyond just you already speak their vocabulary around. Maybe it's a tech stack, and maybe it's around integrations that you could build to really give a competitive advantage by having not just a geographic specific focus.
And Mike, that's a great point, because it's a differentiator. You're going to be entering the market. There are other payroll providers in your market. Again, I will contend that the benefit to you is because this is your customer base. They know you. This is a great way. You have a base of a business already, and you've got a reputation in the market. But a differentiator, particularly in an area such as payroll, is key. And yes, having that depth of knowledge, having that focus into that vertical, and being able to really go and become the niche market for your area. And it's also, there's a whole host of things too. And Mike, you're the marketing guy, but in looking at how then you can position yourself, and we'll talk about go-to-market a little bit later. But if you do pick a vertical, you then can really, all of your social media can be targeted to that. You actually can own the category of, well, again, you just said, maybe it's restaurant payroll in Phoenix. So there are things that you can do to begin to differentiate and really focus your area. And in particular, if that is a vertical that matches what your firm is already doing, I think that's powerful.
Yeah, maybe I know we have a question here at the end about kind of where to start. I think we can almost probably end where we began and talk about maybe some logical launching off points that probably align to this. But in the interim, let's go ahead and jump to number 2. So focus on existing customer base. A heck of a lot easier to cross sell additional products to existing customers than go out and acquire net new logos who've never heard of your name perhaps before. And think about non-geographic specific approaches. So love that. Once we've kind of made some decisions there, now the next decision is really, what are the products and services you're going to offer? Because it's not as simple as saying, okay, I'm going to go process payroll. Payroll can be pretty wide or pretty narrow depending on how you define those services, right?
Yeah, and I think that I mentioned it just a minute ago, but if you've got a current base of business, the first place to start is with the survey of your customers. You want to know who they are currently using for payroll. Again, if you listened to us a couple of weeks ago, the reason to get into the payroll business is because every business needs payroll, and it is so prevalent. But survey your customers to find out who they're using for their payroll, what services they're using for their payroll, what would they like to see that they don't currently get from their payroll provider, and if you were to offer these services, would they prefer to use you over their current provider? Just gives you some basic information that you can then base your decisions upon. But there's so many options here, and I'll review a few of them. I mean, you can choose which, and none of these, there's no right or wrong at all with any of these. You may want to say, listen, I just want to do payroll and tax. I feel that it matches my customer base. That's all they really want right now. I'm looking for the 25 and under. That's all I need. That's absolutely fine, and that works, and it certainly is a great way to start. You may also, if you're just going to do payroll and tax, think about, well, most customers with payroll and tax at some point might need to have a time and labor management solution. So maybe TLM adds to that. That's an easy add. The next questions really go is how far do you go into becoming more of an HCM company, offering more HR services? Do you want to be able to provide in your services payroll, tax, and HR? Okay, so is that all on in a software basis, or do you also then want to get into the outsourced HR? So there are a whole host of ways in which you can approach your business, and you don't have to do it all at the same time. Your business model, and all of this, you're all very astute business people on the phone. Your business model is really what's going to drive this. Your business plan for growth is really what's going to drive this. What I will share with you is that the companies that I've worked with in my past, and the ones who have been successful earlier, have chosen a path to say, I have the big picture. I have my 5-year plan. I want to be, for instance, a full HCM company. I want to offer all of this. But knowing that I need to take baby steps to get there. So my first-year plan is I'm going to be the best I can be. I really want to be able to master payroll, tax, and TLM. That's it. I know everybody needs it. That's a great service. And the benefit to that is, and I'll speak a little bit more to this later, so I'll tease it with, the old adage is eating the elephant one bite at a time. Well, that's what you're doing. You know where the big picture is, but you want to grow your business. You want to grow the expertise. Again, if you're going the vertical route, you really want to dig deep there, and you want to build your customer base. So by the time you get 50, 75 to 100 customers, and you're really beginning to get some scale, and we'll talk a little bit more about operations and efficiencies in a minute. Once you get to that level, you begin to see, okay, so I'm hitting the plateau. Now it's time for me to offer a new service. And then maybe that becomes that you add HR software. And then you master that, and then maybe I need to add another service. Maybe you begin to do some HR outsourcing, providing those services for folks. Oh, I can also do COBRA administration. I can do benefits. So it gives you a path to start adding those, but it comes with basically the plan of what do I want to be in 5 years? How do I get there? And again, I think that starting at the very beginning is a really strong position to do.
Hey, Kevin, maybe it's self-evident, but so it was interesting so your starting point was payroll and tax, right? Payroll and tax filing. And then, additive, whether you want time labor management to go on top of that, HR software versus HR services, and then you can get really wide and all kinds of diversity around the HR services. But your starting point was 2 products. It was payroll and tax. Well, why is it that those 2 things really have to go together if you're going to make a serious entry into this business? Why you couldn't just choose one or the other?
Mike, it's great. That's a great point. But payroll and tax it's like peanut butter and jelly. They go together. If a business of any size, particularly small business, if they're looking to outsource their payroll, which again, all small businesses, if I were running my own business, the first thing I would do is find an accountant and find someone to do my payroll taxes, because it's just too complex. But the way that the payroll software is created, it is created to be able to feed the tax. I mean, you have to set it up knowing all the pre-tax earnings and all the things that you need to understand, the individual, the local state taxes for each of your employees. It is part and parcel. So it is very strong. I mean, as you're evaluating, and we'll talk about evaluating software a little bit later, but to look at, if this is my core, who is, what is the software for me, and what is the platform for me that's solid payroll and tax, so that I then can pay my customers' employees on time and accurately, and they have the comfort, if you will, or confidence that what you're providing to your clients is tax compliant. And that's, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it's incredibly complex. It continues to be complex, and there's no change with that. So that's why, Mike, when you're going to do payroll and tax, it has to be together, and then that's the core. All the other services I mentioned are really more ancillary to that and additive.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about in part 1 was, the tax filing part. So when people loosely, we in the industry kind of loosely throw it around as payroll services. Well, it's really tax services, right? I mean, calculating gross to net, multiplying how many hours you worked times your hourly rate, not tough stuff. I mean, that's a calculator. The scarier part, but in the perhaps riskier part, but where all the value is compliance and outsourcing very complex things for clients, aka tax filing. That's the hard stuff. That's really where the value comes, which is I think probably why it's the starting point. All right. Anything else you want to? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that's where the greatest risk is. The greatest risk for a small business, not outsourcing to a professional and not understanding the tax implications, can really get themselves in a deep hole. And it's, my experience is taxing authorities are not very forgiving for people who just make stupid mistakes or just don't know. So that's certainly, I mean, if anything, as you're considering getting into the payroll and tax business, to know that what you provide your customers is a peace of mind, and in fact, an insurance policy to know that they will be doing the right thing and meeting all compliance.
Yeah, very good. All right, so we talked about who you're going to go after first, your target market. We're going to talk about what products you're going to offer that target market. So you made some decisions on what those things are going to be. How do you think about beginning to hire people and staff up? Is this something you can use existing headcount and repurpose folks? You're going to have to hire dedicated staff? What does this look like?
So this question, Josh and I both will speak based on Josh's experience in the security and the information systems, because that is so critical. But I'll start with, yes, it's a great question, Mike, because if you already have you have customers, you have a company, you have staff already, why can't I just repurpose that staff? And you might be able to repurpose some of the staff that you need. But if there is one person that you should hire to be successful with your new payroll company, your new HCM company, where payroll is the core, you need a very strong, competent operations person who has worked in the payroll service bureau, that has been in the payroll business for a while. And the reason why that's the first hire is that it's very different. I mean, offering payroll services as a service is unique, and you have to understand the payroll taxes, as we talked about, the wage and labor laws. You need to understand payroll and have that basic competency mastered. Then the reason I say I would strongly lean toward hiring someone who has worked in a payroll service bureau before or led a payroll service bureau before, because they know the nuances. They know what you need to do to run that business efficiently. When I first got in the payroll business, Mike, I had someone who was the operations manager, and he basically said to me, and it's been in my mind ever since, payroll is immediate and an emotional. If you understand that when you're providing payroll services to a customer base, they want their payrolls on time, they want to make sure that they're accurate, they want to make sure that you're doing everything on their behalf to make sure that they're compliant. It's that peace of mind, as I mentioned before. So my peace of mind would come if I were in your shoes, and I'm saying I'm going to extend and start a payroll division as a part of my CPA firm. I would want to hire someone with strong operations experience. And then from there, where do you go from there? I mean, it is always very good to have someone who understands, and if you're an accounting firm, this is where you can repurpose and have some people in your own staff. You need to have people very financially sound who can make sure that the books are accurate, to make sure that someone is checking tax reconciliation, in which you need to do on a daily basis. There are some real fundamentals. And at some point, I would also hire a full-time tax manager. So if you're an existing bank, CPA, or a broker, I have two new hires for you. Hire that strong operations manager who can then run basically your implementations, your CSR, and your pack out for a period of time. I would hire someone who knows taxes very, very well from a payroll tax perspective, and those are your first two hires. You don't necessarily have to hire a salesperson yet. If you've got a base of customers, you can cross-sell that base first until you start getting some saturation there, or you feel like you're ready to move out, and then you can hire a salesperson. And we can talk about some of that in a few minutes, but that would be my advice to you. Josh, what are your thoughts on the technical support and security?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, surprisingly, I would actually echo your comments, and I think that the first person to hire would be a really strong, operations person, someone who has a deep background in payroll. And specifically from my perspective is security, because security really begins with people, right? It's people, processes, and technology, so it starts with people. So someone who really understands the controls that need to be in place, how they should organize the team, how they should define the flow of work through the system, just how you're creating separation of duties, where you're creating the checks and balances within the system, what payroll would need to be verified by another person before it goes through. All of those little steps that have to be done even on the first payroll, right? So it's because like you said, payroll is emotional. You're dealing with people's money. You want to be able to check that. As far as technical support, that's probably certainly not in the beginning, but you have to make a determination of how you're going to handle that, whether it's outsourced or whether you do hire someone. Maybe you have someone already that does IT, and then you wouldn't need to worry about that. But again, going back to where I started, the first person should be a strong operations person that has a background in setting up and maintaining controls.
A couple things jump to my mind. So Kathy, you talked about maybe you don't have to hire a salesperson out of the gate. And then talk about, cross-selling to existing customers. As a marketer, I certainly believe in the value of marketing. But the very best marketing there is happy customers who just evangelize your products and services to others. You don't need any marketing, right? It's all free because you provide good service. It's so critical to get, customer number 1 and customer number 10, customer number 1 through number 10 right, and make them love you so much, because this is an ongoing service. I know we're going to talk a little bit about, where you see sometimes, new payroll providers, maybe stumble or, fall on the face a little bit. What are some of their struggles? What would, let me steal from that section here. What do you see as some of the struggles, maybe some of the mistakes people make when it comes to hiring? Maybe hiring up too much, staffing up too much, wrong expertise, wrong expectations, just simply not used to the pace of the rigor and routine of a payroll business model versus a different business model. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I would go back to my payroll is immediate and emotional, and because of that, it is not like a typical business. You need people who are committed and dedicated to making sure that they are doing the right thing, that they are getting that payroll out on time, that they do take that extra step, and it's so critical. I mean, anytime you're hiring for any position, you want to make sure you're hiring for the the right person for this, and so this is, again, it's very critical to get that right person. And you asked what are some of the pitfalls. I have seen folks underestimate that, what Josh and I both just said, which was the strong and deep competency in payroll, because if you don't understand the ins and outs of payroll, it's going to be very difficult to actually learn the new software that you're going to be using. It's going to be difficult to really grow your business and delight your customers the way you want. So I think that is just, again, so critical as hiring that right person. And I think the next thing comes to, well, how, what are those metrics? And, there are several numbers that float around out there, and I'll share with you, a couple that, if you have an up and running service bureau, I mean, in general, I have heard you can have one CSR or one customer service rep per 200 clients. So for every 200 clients. But starting out, you really need to you need to staff up a little bit more. So maybe it's one for every one CSR for every 100. And I learned this recently from one of our operations executives who actually owned her own service bureau and started her own service bureau, and really was talking to me and to others about her experiences. And she said, really, out of the gate, you can have one payroll professional. They can do everything. I mean, they could actually take the payroll, they could implement the payroll, they could support the payroll, they could do the pack out of the payroll. All the things that need to be done can be done by one person. But that's really where that 1 to 100 is probably better. Once you get scale and you have more people on staff, you then can begin to cover more folks. And we'll get into this in just a minute, but it also depends on the type of business, and I'll just tease you and we'll get into it a little later, but the type of business that you want to offer. Do you want to have everything online? Basically it's called traditional, where you have phone, fax in business, and that's going to be a little bit more labor intensive. And so your staff will be spending more time doing those types of administrative things versus all online. Or do you do a hybrid of both? So that actually also impacts how your staffing is. But I think that you don't want to go in with a full staff of people. Again, I've always been more cautious than I have been overly, optimistic when it comes to these types of things. Start small, get some success, get a team that really works well together, and then you can grow from that. You don't have to have a large payroll team initially as you're growing your business, and especially if you already have an existing business in place. You have the hardware, you have the building, you have probably a lot of the technology you need. The infrastructure you need for this is already a sunk cost because it's part of your business already. You're adding a new department that you can grow in a measured way.
Yeah, very good. All right, so this next question, I don't want to take this as a big sales pitch for sure. Obviously, we think we're the best, and really believe it. We can help these people grow. We can help their clients grow. But in a vendor agnostic kind of a way, if you could, how should banks, CPAs, brokers be thinking about choosing not just the right vendor, but what are the features and benefits and type of configuration and hardware that they should be thinking about when making a selection on a platform?
Hey, Josh, you want to tackle the hardware first, and then I'll jump into the software?
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly, having the right hardware to support your business is critical. So, it kind of plays in with the software. So, are you going to choose to host the software yourself? So you'd need a server stack and networking equipment and a place to store all that, and some environmental and backup power and all these different controls or different safeguards in place in order to maintain that. Or do you want to outsource it? That could mean having someone else host that for you in a data center or something like that, or have a vendor hosted in the cloud as a SaaS provider. And so those would certainly are certain considerations that you'd need to take in, and then that would kind of drive what hardware do you need. Because certainly you wouldn't need a server stack if you're going to host or have the software hosted in the cloud. But certainly you'd need the right hardware for your employees and staff. That would be what kind of computer do they have? I mean, if you would have asked a payroll person 6 months ago, would any of your staff ever work from home? The resounding answer, like 95+%, would be no, never. Nobody ever works from home. Payroll is always done in the office. Well, you find yourself in scenarios sometimes, as the one we're in now, where now businesses had to completely shift to remote primarily, right? So the CSRs had to work from home. That meant in the past, payroll companies had selected desktops because they maybe saved a few $100 per unit, but that doesn't provide the ability to work from home, right? So in a situation like we're in now, or even a natural disaster like a tornado or a power outage or something like that, you might not be able to work from the office. How do you support that? So buying the right, or investing in the right hardware up front will allow you to maintain continuity of operations across a multitude of scenarios. Another piece of hardware is printers. As much as we'd like to think everybody is paid with direct deposit these days, still there are many companies that prefer paper checks. So a printer that prints with the press and seal style printer, they're fairly expensive. Also something that's probably not something you'd have a duplicate of. Because you wouldn't typically need more than one, and then so you'd have to think about that too. I don't want to steal too much from the security section, but thinking about the technology investment primarily would be the hardware, having the right type of hardware, computers and printers, but then also software vendors extends beyond just the payroll software. So having the right suite of tools, whether it's Office or Google or something, where that you can communicate securely with your clients, so you can potentially provide some file sharing. You may need to pass data with a significant amount of PII on it between you and your customer to be able to, say, verify payroll or submit direct deposit changes or employee changes. A lot of personal information going back and forth. So having the right set of tools to be able to communicate securely is critical.
So punchline, Josh, this isn't as simple as, hey, I'm gonna throw this on a computer, on a server rack in my closet, or my vendor is gonna do it for me, or I'm just gonna throw it up in AWS. There's really a whole stack here, right? I mean, from printers and communicating secure files with clients, a lot more considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's where do you store those files? Do you have a file server in your office that has all of these implementation or other support documents? Do you store that in a closet in your office, or do you host it in the cloud somewhere? A file service like Google or SharePoint with Office 365. So there's a lot of different considerations. Certainly, with the amount of PII that you have, security is always a piece of it.
Yeah, very good.
Well,
Kathy, how about
Josh,
the front end when it comes to more like just choosing the right feature functionality to serve your market? How does someone begin when they don't know what they don't know?
well, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about the plan. If you know what your target market is and you know how you want to start your business, it helps you guide your decision making in terms of what software you're going to need. And what do I mean by that? One is, and I have found that basically you have two types of companies that are in the payroll space, if you will, or become payroll service bureaus. They are payroll-centric companies where payroll is the vast majority. It's the core, and that HR and some of these other things may be ancillary. Not but maybe 80% of your business is payroll, tax only. That's what I'm doing, but I need some HR. Then you've got HR, very HR-centric. HR consulting companies. They think of HR first, and so HR is incredibly important in then payroll. So I say that because if you're payroll-centric, you want to make sure that you look for that in your new software. You look for software that excels in payroll, provides you the tools that you need to run your service bureau, provides you solid tax. If it's more HR, you need to look at, well, do I need a broader HR offering? Do I need to make sure I have more features in the software that will allow me to handle a greater breadth of service and also maybe a larger type of business? So I think those two things are very important in the decision. I think what's also very important is when you're looking at the software today, it is so different. And I've been in the payroll, I'll date myself, I've been in the payroll business for 20 years. And I'm a full believer of technology being the great equalizer. And what that means is today the software that you can offer small business clients is in many cases very similar to what I used to sell 10 years ago to my mid-market national accounts. It's the same breadth of service. You can get a full suite of HR services to a small business. You can get all these things that typically used to be for bigger businesses, all now part of a software. So, online software today has really come a long way in the past 10 years. And, so you will be looking at some key things as it relates to online software. What is the employee experience? If there are two things that I see as trends, and Mike, I know you study this a lot too, in software, and it's looking at the user experience, and the employee experience is critical. The employees want to be able to go online and look at their own check stubs. They want to be able to do their own benefit enrollment. They want to be able to change their W-4. They want to be able to do some things themselves. They want to be able to be hired online. All of that stuff go online, so you don't have to sit and spend the first 4 hours when you join a new company filling out paperwork. All of those things are critical now. You want to be able to offer that type of service. In the managers as well. I mean, the managers work here, taking the paper out of the equation, eliminating having to fax things in when you can capture everything and keep it in the software. So the user experience, the capability, the web and cloud capability of the software, the usability of that from both the manager and the administrator and the employee standpoint, I think are things really to consider. And then also mobile. We're getting to the situation now that so many of us, I can do a lot of my work on my phone. We as a society have become very mobile in terms of how we use the technology. Maybe we're not traveling around as much as we did 4 months ago, but we're still as reliant on those same tools. And to be able to have the capacity to process your payroll on the web in an application that allows you in 3 little simple swipes that you're able to process the payroll for a landscaper who may have 3 to 5 employees. That's really key. So those are the things when you're evaluating, what is it you're looking for from your target market, where are you trying to start? Where, are you payroll centric? Are you HR centric? Or you're somewhere in between? And then looking at the experience you want to be able to offer to your new clients. I think all those things are very important.
Yeah, very good. And I think that really cues up kind of the next question. There's must-haves from the consumer's point of view that is different than must-haves from the provider's point of view, right? It's not all feature functionality. As a provider, you have to actually operate and support. But what are some of the must-haves just in the marketplace?
Well, a couple of things I'll say, both from end user can be two things. End user could be also the employee, but also the new service bureau, those of you who are getting into this business. And I'll start there. So if you are a financial institution and you're broadening out into payroll, what's important to you? Well, you want to be able to have an experience of your payroll, of the payroll offering within your own software, your own online experience that you have with your clients. You want to be able to, that they are driven to your bank website to be able to process their payrolls. That's critical. It's a way that you can cross-sell your other services. And every 2 or 3, every week or every other week or so, they're in your application. So I think that's important. So integrations. There may be a particular integration that you need. So those are some things that I think is important from a bank perspective. An accounting perspective, obviously, integration with your software. Whatever GL software that you use, that's very critical to your decision, making sure that there's the interfaces that will work. And also the same thing from a broker perspective. If you happen to be using a third party for a benefit enrollment, or if you're using other providers, being able to integrate that with your software is critical. And it goes on and on, whether you're offering, if you're a company that offers 401k services and you're trying to get into the payroll business, or if you're in insurance overall and you want to get into the payroll business. So that's one perspective. And then, as I said earlier, the experience of your end users. I mean, the picture you see is very typical. These are the employees of the companies that you'll be providing payroll for. They are wanting to have a wonderful experience. They want to be able to onboard, when they join their new company, they want to be able to do that easily. As I said, they want to be able to do a lot of functions that used to require paper completely on the web, completely on their phone, and be able to have a great experience with that. It becomes really more of an extension of just their everyday life, being on the web, as we all are today, and in social media. Being able to have that same interaction within your employer software is really critical. So, I mean, I think that's, as I said, as I mentioned a little earlier, those things are very important. Being able to provide to the needs of the new employee workforce, I think, is critical.
All right, thanks, Kathy. I'm looking at the clock, and I probably need to accelerate a little bit here. So let's jump to.
Mike, there's one question that came up while we're moving over just quickly, and that is, someone asked, when I said one CSR for every 100 clients, and that was like, well, how can you handle 100 payrolls? Your clients are not processing payrolls every week at the same time. So you're going to have different frequencies. You're going to have different needs. And so a 1 CSR to 100 clients is a good ratio that you could use.
Yeah, no, that was an important one here. Thank you. All right, let's talk about tax filing. So we hinted at this earlier on. This is kind of core to doing payroll. So if you're an accountant, you probably have some competency in payroll, right? You got some competency in tax preparation. If you're a bank, you're used to moving money and you understand all this conceptually. If you're a benefit broker, you certainly know conceptually about the space, but different world when you actually talk about holding people's, drawing people's funds, sitting on that money, not just filing the paperwork, but actually transmitting funds on behalf. Talk us through that.
And there is such a complexity when it comes to tax filing, and even a number of accounting firms that I've worked with currently and in the past. The one thing that they'll say is, we don't necessarily, doing all the things you just described, Mike, is we'd have to hire up for that. I mean, that's not what we're doing today. That's not the normal business taxes that we handle today. So it is a decision, I think, whether or not as you're opening up your new payroll in your new HCM company as an extension of your business, do you keep it in-house, which a lot of people do, and there are a lot of strengths to that, particularly if your software has the tax filing as a part of the payroll software. If it's all part and parcel into a single software, it makes great sense that you make the investment in hiring someone with payroll tax experience to handle that for you. So that's a decision you have to make. Do I have the expertise already? Can I hire the expertise to do that? Because there are cost savings for you in the long run if you hire the right person and you have the right processes in place of managing your own tax filing within your organization. And as Mike mentioned, there are a lot of things you have to do. Obviously, you need to, there's the outflow of information, there's the ACH component of it, there is the tax reconciliation, which a lot of people don't do on a daily basis, and it's imperative that you do. The segregation of duties from the person who actually sends the file to the person that actually then reconciles the file. So all of those things are critically important. But we do find businesses who are getting into the payroll business for the first time, the one area that just scares them to death is, I'm not ready to handle my own taxes. So there are companies out there that can utilize the tax function within your software, or you have that themselves, so you can outsource that. That could either be your long-term goal, is to continue to have that outsourced and know that that's being handled by a professional who does that every day, and that's, people do that. You also can use that as an avenue, a bridge, if you will, knowing that in the next 2 to 3 years, I want to bring this in-house, but right now, that's one area that I feel that having a professional tax outsourcing company makes good sense for.
Very good. I got follow-up questions, but I think we, just for sake of time, we need to continue on. So can you talk about, so you've been, we've both been at this in the industry for multiple decades. But what are the common mistakes or challenges that you see? So make no mistake, obviously we want people to join the ranks, right? We're encouraging banks, CPAs, brokers to get in the payroll business. Lots of good reasons to do so, covered in part 1 of the webinar series. But we also want good expectations. So what are some of these pitfalls for people to be on the lookout for?
Mike, and it's smart to, when you're assessing this, you're right, we want people in the payroll business, but we want them to understand the pros and cons. And the pros by far outweigh the cons. But being aware of what these pitfalls are will help you to avoid them as you're going forward. So I think the first thing I said, hire an experienced operations person. People who don't do that run into issues. So I think that's clearly number one. The other, you said just a minute ago about expectations, and that is so important. Again, start with a business plan, know what you want to try to accomplish, be measured in that plan. You don't need to go out and add 100 new clients immediately. Add clients in a measured way that you can absorb as you're learning your software, as you're learning to be a service bureau. Do it in a way that you then can grow, use that as your platform and then grow from there. The other thing I mentioned earlier, which was eat the elephant one bite at a time. Don't get starry-eyed over the fact that, say if you're in a bank and you have a customer that has 5,000 employees and they're unhappy with their current provider and they would like to look at your service. That would be great, right? That may make your month, may make your quarter, but that it's okay to say, you know what, we're not ready for that right now. We'd love to take your business. I would love to be your partner. You've been a great bank customer, but what I'd like to do right now is, we're still kind of new at this. Give us some time. We'd love to earn your business. And when the time is right, we'll call you back. And that's very hard to do. I was on a call just yesterday with someone who was considering getting into the payroll business just like you, and said, they have sales staff already because they're the part of the business. I've got. It was a 5,000-man company, and we went through the same conversation. So don't be afraid to temper those types of expectations. You need to do that for your own health. You could get there at some point down the road. And I just think that, having a plan, if you don't have a plan and you don't stick with the plan, and we all know that you can adapt over time, but if you don't have that plan and you're not working forward, it's so easy to get distracted and start doing things off of what you were initially planning to do. Again, if you're learning your system, which you need to do, you need to take the time to learn a new software system. You need to hire the right people. You need to be very cognizant of the fact that you can't do everything for everybody. Another of my adages is, I can do anything, I just can't do everything. Make sure that you stay very focused on doing your plan and executing on your plan. You'll have the opportunity to get there. So those are just a few things that come to mind to me, Mike. Are there any things that Josh, that come to mind for you?
You know what, Josh, you might be on mute. For time, I'm going to move it forward because Kathy, I know you've got a hard stop to the top here too.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, best market strategy. I think we cover this one an awful lot in the beginning, right? I'll kind of put my 2 cents in, but I'd ask you, Kathy, to kind of talk about, maybe a launching pad, a starting point. For me, I think to the future, so many businesses, CPAs, banks, brokers, and I'd say even largely the small regional payroll providers, their value proposition is integrally tied to geography. It's a company who doesn't like or want to do business with one of the large national providers, and they want to do business with someone local. Well, why do they want someone local? It's because they want great service. Well, what happens when the big nationals provide great service? I made the joke, I think, on the last webinar. I'm holding a phone in my left hand. It's, from a company headquartered in Cupertino, California, and made in China, and I love it. I don't ever have to call support because the thing just works and it's really intuitive, right? It's my iPhone. And so the reality is, the software improves. The importance of location becomes less and less important as the products are just good and they work. And the value prop has to be tied more towards I'm the best payroll provider in the restaurant business, in the golf course, in the long-term healthcare facilities. I'm the best payroll provider, the best human capital management, including payroll and HR and benefits, in the hospitality industry in the state of Arizona, right? It's that kind of a mentality. So I think that's the place to aim at. But what do you think, Kathy, would be the best place to start? If we're going to go into payroll business tomorrow, where do we begin?
If you have an existing customer base, that is your first place to go, because that's your base. They know you already, they trust you already. That is the very first step, and then you can broaden out from there.
Yeah, I think no question. All right, let me. We got 10 minutes here for our last 2 questions. Let me, and I know that these are going to be tied more back to Josh. Josh, you talked a little bit about technology needed, some of the tech stack. We're going to end on security, which is like. Security's always been important, but 2019 kind of crushed a lot of people in this industry. So it's maybe the single most important topic in consideration. That's where we're going to end with it. Anything else you'd want to add on the technology stack?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the key to technology is really making a decision, like kind of what your strategy is going to be, whether you're going to host the data yourself, like you want to license the software, you want to install it and run it on-prem because maybe that's the way you currently run software, or do you want to outsource it to a partner, maybe host it in the cloud, and kind of, so that choice, like that really will drive really the main expenditures on technology, right? Whether you're choosing to kind of kind of gradually build in. One of the advantages of the cloud SaaS solution is that it's an OpEx expenditure, and it allows you to gradually, because you're licensing it usually on a size basis. So as you grow, it costs more. So you can start out small, and that might be best for your business. But with hardware, you have to purchase big because you're making a big CapEx expenditure, and then you hope you grow into it. So it's definitely kind of which way you want to go. I personally, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, knowing our next question is security related. Can you talk to? I mean, I'd say we are still living through this tipping point of, hey, I don't want my software and data in the cloud because I have better controls and better security locally. And there's a whole bunch. Some of that might be some truth to it. There's a whole bunch of falsehoods in there too.
Sure.
At the same time, just because AWS has better security than I could ever dream of implementing myself, I'm still moving data through the cloud. Can you kind of talk through, jumping stealing a little bit from our next question, considerations of what my technology stack should look like, where it should live as it relates to security?
Yeah, absolutely. So those are great points. And really, so security, it's always your security. So whether you host the data on-prem or whether you're hosting it in the cloud, you're still responsible for the security of that data. And so to your point, Mike, that does scares people sometimes. I'm giving control of my data over to somebody else. And so the question really is, how do you evaluate that vendor? How do you evaluate that partner to determine if they're implementing the controls that I would expect to implement on-prem? From a scale perspective, it is very difficult for a small business to implement the level of controls necessary to really be redundant. Going back to Kathy's point about payroll being emotional, it is zero fault tolerant. People do not like getting a payroll missed. So being able to have continuity of operations through any potential disasters, whether that's a natural disaster or like a power outage or a pandemic, being able to provide service seamlessly in any of those scenarios is really critical. And it's very difficult to say, well, I'm going to host the data in my office, right? So just because you take backups and you store them off-site, if the building gets knocked down by a tornado, you're not going to have servers to stand the backups in. You're not going to stand up servers because you're not going to have any servers. It's great you have backups, but how do you get the system back online? If your systems are down for even a few hours, you're going to miss somebody's payroll. Like somebody is going to miss a payroll. And that's, again, it's just generally, nobody tolerates that. So choosing a SaaS provider would provide that redundancy because the cloud offers the scale that allows that SaaS vendor to distribute their systems over larger geographic regions, to provide redundancy across multiple systems. Again, and you're relying on an even bigger vendor like AWS or Google or Azure to provide the redundancy on an additional layer. And so those are factors to be considered. But going back to security, it's really about evaluating that vendor. So you choose a vendor, or you're thinking about choosing a vendor that to outsource to host your software. Things to do would be, you could start with something as simple as a questionnaire. Here's all my list of questions that I need to have you answer to say, this is what I would do to secure the data. Are you doing all of these things? But even easier or even better would be to look for a vendor that has a SOC report. So this is a vendor that's been evaluated by a third party. The SOC reports are done by CPA firms, so it's governed by the AICPA. And they've gone through and they've tested nearly every conceivable control, security, availability, confidentiality, privacy, et cetera, to ensure that the vendor is doing the litany of controls that they would need to do to protect your data. And then you can get that report and you can look at each piece and say, yep, all these controls, that's what I would expect to see. And my vendor is doing it and they either passed or failed.
Yeah, Josh, so our advanced slides that we're obviously creeping into security here at the end of our talk to us about I think we naturally gravitate towards these black screens and a bunch of code that doesn't make sense to the average human. When we think security, we think hackers, right? With
Yeah.
black. But the real vulnerability is humans, right? Can you talk through the people part of the people process and technology here?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Really, it begins with people. And the example I would use is hackers could try to break into some big bank, some big insurance company, some big, name your industry, right? But that's very difficult and requires a very, very extensive set of skills. It's much easier to send 50,000 phishing emails to a bunch of small businesses. And if even there's a 4% click rate on those 50,000 emails that are sent automated, by the way, so it's not somebody manually sending 50,000 emails, right? That's still 2,000 people that opened those emails. And if only 4% of those act on that, that's still 80 people that have changed somebody's payroll or provided some personal information to an attacker. It's just much easier to just blanket phishing emails to people than it is to try to hack in, right? So securing the human is really critical. And interestingly enough, of all the different security investments that you can make, training is the least expensive, but it's the biggest bang for your buck. It's something you can implement right out of the gate, $5, $10 a person per year. And that investment, pays huge dividends. I mean, one fraudulent payroll run could cost you $80,000, right, or more. So that small investment in training and preparing users to understand the fraud that we see in the payroll business is really critical. And I think it would be something right out of the gate that would be very valuable to consider.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to turn this into a training session for hackers, but
No. Yeah.
Right. But just as simple as your technology could be buttoned up super tight, but if your human processes allow for a client whom you've never even met face to face to call you on the phone, give you some credentials over the phone, add a direct deposit employee that you just pay $20,000 the next pay period, somebody's out 20 grand.
Right.
And technology had nothing to do with it, right? So there's a whole world that has to do with the people side of this. Okay. Yeah. Josh, so I know we're basically at time here. Anything you'd want to wrap or last thing to give guidance around how people should be thinking about security as they want to stick a toe in this water?
Right. So, yeah, absolutely. The last thing I would just touch on is cyber insurance, right? So it's fairly inexpensive. Certainly, it's a very good investment, right? Because it's just another form of business insurance. But what I would caution is it's not a get out of jail free card, right? If you have an incident, right, whether it's a fraudulent payroll or otherwise, the reputational losses cannot be covered by cyber insurance. So, going back to where I started with, the first hire, somebody who understands controls, that's critical, so that you can implement those controls as you grow to cover, these different risks as they crop up. Because as you get bigger, the risks will change. So understanding that and then implementing new controls to cover that as you grow is key. And then ultimately, have the cyber insurance, because it will cover the $20,000, like Mike said, but it doesn't cover any reputational losses. And again, payroll is a lot about trust, and so not losing that trust is critical.
Yeah, very good. Josh, thanks so much. Yeah, and thanks to everybody else for joining us today. I know we're at time. Here's what I'd say. Listen to part 1 of this webinar series if you haven't already. I think it makes a really strong business case as to why banks, CPAs, benefit brokers should be considering entering the payroll business to add more value to your clients, to extend and deepen those relationships, and to simply help them grow. And that's our mentality. By helping them grow, we help you grow, which is why we've taken our entire suite of products, our payroll and tax, time and attendance, HR software, and HR services. white label these for you so that you can build your brand in the marketplace. You can grow your business. We're happy to be kingmakers behind the scenes without anybody knowing our name and provide you the support to do so. So hopefully you enjoyed this webinar series. If you got any questions, by all means, reach out. We have recorded this. We'll be sending out a recording, also posting it online. And with that, wish you a very happy day and safety as we all navigate these completely uncharted waters and business begins to reopen during this pandemic. Thanks, have a great day.